Okay, so if I could just ask somebody to volunteer to let me know if you ever can't hear me or see the screen, if we just have one person. Mrs. Perry, would you mind helping? Yeah, so can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me and see the slideshow that I've got on? That's great. Okay, so thanks for coming today for the Year 2 Maths workshop and give me an opportunity to go through what we teach in Year 2 for Maths. The aims of the workshop firstly are for me to outline the national curriculum, so what your child will be learning this year and what they need to know in order to meet the expected standard at Year 2. Also, we're going to talk about the approach that we take at St Mary's, which is a mastery curriculum, which has been recommended by the government now and adopted by a lot of schools. And we are part of the White Rose scheme there, and we follow that. Also, to give you the chance to know what the best thing for you to do would be at home in order for you to support your child in their mathematical development. Okay, so moving on. So I'm not going to read through all these national curriculum expectations for you, showing you what your child needs to know. I'm just going to highlight a couple, but a copy of the slides is going to be on the website. So if you wanted to cross-reference it, then it will give you an opportunity, and that's why I've put it on there. First of all, in the autumn term, we always start across school with working on number and place value, and we've been doing that, throughout the autumn term. One of the things that we spent a lot of time now is counting in steps of 2, 3, 5, and 10 to really support the children. We started that right the first time they got back, and they're getting, really good at counting in 2s, 3s, 5s, and 10s. And it's a case of just practice makes perfect for that. Your children now, rather than just working within 10 in reception and then 20 in year 1, we're really working all those sort of numbers all the way up to 100 in year 2. So we're building on the work that they've already done in year 1. And a lot of the work that we do is around them understanding symbols now, so deepening their understanding by doing less than and greater than symbols, comparing objects, comparing numbers, and they do that throughout school, except the numbers obviously get higher as they progress through Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. One of the biggest things that I wanted to talk about, which is really their understanding, would be their understanding of place value. They need to understand that the 2 in 22 means 2 tens. And I know that sounds, that's obvious, but it's not, and if you think back to perhaps when you were doing your maths, it was kind of assumed that you would know that kind of knowledge, but they really need to have an understanding of what the number means in a 2-digit number. So the fact that the first digit is going to be how many tens and then how many ones. We used to call them units, we call them ones now when we're teaching. So that's really a lot of the work that we did in autumn term. And then when we come to look, and we moved on in autumn 2 to look at addition and subtraction, and we're working with 1 and 2-digit numbers all the way up to 100 there. A really important part, obviously, of year 1 work was learning their number facts to 10. And obviously that's progressed now in year 2, the expectation that they would need to know addition and subtraction facts to 20. I'll be honest with you, when they came back in September, they were a little bit rusty, some of them, with their number bonds to 10, but we're certainly getting there now, and we're working up to 20. We started counting in 2s, 3s, 5s, and 10s, and now we are working with multiplication in spring term, and the children are really coming on with that times tables knowledge, which they need to know really off by heart, and the division facts will come later on in the year. They need to understand odd and even numbers as well, and understand how to recognise them. Later on in the year, this term, we're going to be doing some fraction work, and that can be quite tricky. I'll be honest with you, it's a topic that children do find quite tricky, but we use lots of practical objects to help them have a really good understanding of fractions when we're talking about fractions of a shape or fractions of amount. And then later on in the year, we'll be looking at measurement and looking at time. But to be honest, I do time right from the first time they come in. It's no good leaving it to the last week of summer term to get the clocks out. We're looking at the clocks on a daily basis. Children can recognise when it's break. And when it's lunchtime and when it's home time, and I would recommend that you do that sort of thing with them at home, but I'll talk to you about that later on. And then we've got some work on geometry, which we're coming on to this half term. We'll be looking at, obviously they started 2D shape. I know they touched a little bit on 3D shape names and reception, but we'll be looking at the words to describe those vertices and things like that to help them. And we're looking at, turns, anti-clockwise and clockwise, and quarter turns and half turns and full turns. I start teaching that in PE pretty soon, and then we look at it later on in maths so they've got a really deep understanding of that. And later on this term as well, we're going to be looking at some statistics, looking at some pictograms, and looking at some bar charts as well. Okay, so that's what they should know by the end of year 2 in order to reach the expected standard. We use a mastery curriculum at St Mary's, and we've had an awful lot of training on teaching for mastery because that's the most successful way. It's been proven to be most effective. It means that the whole class moves through the content at the same pace. We encouraging children to think deeply about their maths, not just to learn things off by rote. And we hope, and it shows that if you're successful, then you build self-confident learners. Differentiation takes place through depth rather than acceleration. What that means is we won't have children working on the year 3 curriculum. So if your child is a high flyer at maths, then they won't be going on to do year 3 work, but they will be deepening their understanding of year 2 work. And we'll perhaps show you some examples of how tricky that can be to really, we're working within 2-digit numbers, working within 100, but really going deep into it rather than trying to skip on to the next year's work. So just to talk a little bit about what teaching looks like at St Mary's for maths. Your children will be doing a flashback at the beginning of their lesson. This has proved, I would say as a teacher, I think it's one of the most effective things we've brought in. The idea of the flashback is to recap the learning that they did yesterday, recap the learning they did last week, and then look at areas that they did in previous year groups to try and help them remember. So this is an example of one they'll be doing tomorrow. So we've been working on multiplication since they got back. So I've put the answers in there to take any pressure off you. I've put the answers in red, so nobody feels uncomfortable about I'm not going to ask anybody what the question is. Obviously they don't get to see the answers, but this gets put on the board for them at the beginning of the lesson, and then they on their whiteboards in year 2 will write the answers. And you can see we did that yesterday, we did this today, so they'll be able to work out that multiplication, and there's a picture to help them, and there's some other things that we've been doing this week. And then it's going back to money, because we did money the last few weeks of the autumn term, and then this is something that they did they've done something that they kind of touched on in year 1, but that is pushing them that last question, but it's obviously a fraction question. And then every day we look at the time, okay, or a shape later on in the year, but this is just to reinforce that and the importance of recall. So they're trying to remember the money, because what we don't want to do is just do money in the autumn term for a few weeks and then never touch it until they do an assessment at the end of the year. And I find that has been really good at identifying what children perhaps don't understand, and also helping them to remember so they don't forget. A mastery curriculum means that pupils get a really deep, long-term, secure knowledge. I mean, you're all younger than me, but when I was at school, we learned everything by rote. And, I did column subtraction and addition and long division, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I just learned that was the method. It was a bit like cookery. And if you put the right numbers in the right boxes, then, with fingers crossed, you got the right answer. And, the problem with that was that, if you didn't get the right answer, you weren't really sure why, because you didn't really understand it. So right from the beginning now, that's been recognised that all children need to understand, whatever their ability, need to have a deeper and greater understanding of the maths that they do. And that's why the teaching of maths is so radically different from it was, you know, even sort of 10, 15 years ago, or possibly, you know, obviously when you were at school as well. Mastery has 3 basic elements, the elements of fluency. So we recognise that children need to be really quick. Their recall needs to be immediate. And that's why we bang on as teachers about number bonds to 10, number bonds to 20. And if you think about what we know about how children learn now, and if you think yourself, if you are having to recall what the number bond is, yeah, and having to use your fingers, then that makes column addition, yeah, very, very difficult, yeah, because you're trying to recall and do this and you can't get it right, yeah. So it's important that that you know how to add those numbers together and the answer comes to you straight away, so that you're not using up your working memory. So it means it's easier for you. So I think that's really important. And if you do feel that your child is struggling with maths, then I would recommend that you start with getting their fluency right before you start to do anything else, so that they have got a bit of space when they're doing the maths. We're also working on confidence. They can reason mathematically. That means we do a lot of talking in maths, a lot of talking about why we think something is the case. And also we work for everyone, all children, to be able to problem solve. It's not the case that only the most, you know, the higher prior attainers in school do the problem solving. Everybody has a go at the problem solving at the level that is right. Okay, so when we're teaching for mastery as well, we use concepts. These are the 3 main concepts that we use. So when we're talking about concrete, what we mean is stuff. Okay, so when we're teaching maths, we'll start by this. I don't know if you can see very well, but we've got something like this, which is we call these deans, yeah, which are, I don't know whether you've seen them, but they're basically, obviously we've got 10 here, we've got individual pieces to help them understand that, you know, there are 10 ones in 10, yeah, and also 10 tens in 100. So they're actually moving these things around. There's plenty of those resources in school and they have access to them when we first introduce the concept. After a while, when they're feeling more comfortable, and for some children that's quicker than others, we will move on to pictorial representations of these things. It might be these deans, or it might be using counters, yeah, or it might be using Unifix cubes, yeah, but we'll be using pictures of those, yeah. Once they've done the actual objects, then they move on to the pictures, and then after that, when they're feeling comfortable, they move on to the abstract, i.e. the number representations, when they're doing their maths. Now, it's not always, you know, fluid, start with concrete, pictorial, abstract for all children. It might be that you start with concrete, then they move quickly on, and then they have to go back if they misunderstand something. But I think it's important for you to understand that we don't just show them a number sentence straight away. There's a lot of work before we get there, and perhaps this is a better picture to explain it to you. So these are the concrete. Hopefully you'll have seen the Numicom, which they use as well, or might be fingers, yeah, and then they'll move on to the pictorial and then the abstract. Okay, now I just wanted to show you how we teach the main operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication and division in year 2, so you have a deeper understanding yourself, because I imagine it would be different from what you yourself saw. So first of all, we will be looking at, actually, when we're talking about addition, we would be using practical things. And if you were doing it at home, you could easily use counters. You don't have to buy these, and you certainly don't have to buy Numicom because it costs a fortune. Yeah, you could use anything that looks the same if you want to do that. But you can see here we've got what I call the base 10, and can you see, perhaps hopefully it's big enough, that's one of these long ones here is the same here. So when we're introducing addition, we will show them, we will make these numbers first using the concrete, then we will move on to a picture representation of that. So you can see that starting to look like your traditional column addition. Then when we've done that, that is not until they really understand this. Remember, when they've got this here, most of them will also have these here. So alongside looking at the picture, they'll also be able to have a look at the actual things and move those around and touch them and count them. And then you can see moving from a picture, yeah, then you've got showing what you're adding there, yeah. So you're going to be adding your ones, and then you're going to be adding your tens. And then from that, I know this doesn't match. I'm afraid I couldn't get two that matched, but that is then when they're comfortable with that, then they'll move on to what we call the column addition. And you've got the T for tens and the ones there. You've got the O for ones there. And first of all, with column addition, we would show them how to do them without going across the boundary of 10. And then once that's secure, we would show them how to do that. Now, when I was at school, and we used to talk about, you know, borrowing and things like that. But when we're doing it here and carrying forward, we use the word exchange. So we explain to them, if we've got a number which is over 9, then we explain to them that we're going to exchange the ones for tens. Yeah, that's how we explain it to them. Yeah, and I've got an example here where you've got 6 and 5. So 6 and 5, we explain to them 6 ones and 5 ones. That's going to make you 11. Remember that 11 is 1 10 and 1 1. And so we've got the 10 in the tens column. Yeah. And as we're explaining that to them, then they start to understand, yeah, the importance of adding it back on. And then they understand that they have got 6 tens and 1 1. Yeah. Okay, so that's really what we're working on there. And then once we also showing them how that's made up, yeah, so they really understand the in both ways. They understand it as column, but also as a number sentence as well. Yeah, and then when they get really good, yeah, and this is when we talk about really challenging children, rather than, you know, in the old days, if somebody could do these really well, we might have gone on to using hundreds numbers. What we'll then do is perhaps give them something, and we'll take one of these numbers away and ask them what it could be. So we might give them the answer and take some of the numbers away. So they're really having to think, what could be there? Yeah, and that can actually, if you start doing missing box calculations, that can get very tricky, and the children find that hard. And I've got an example of something here. If we were really pushing somebody, you know, fill in the missing digits to complete this number sentence. So in the past, we might have said, oh, you're finding math this quite easy, so we'll move you on to year 3. Now we would keep within the 2-digit numbers, but we would start to get them to do this. And you can see that's quite a difficult calculation for children to do. And also we'd be getting them to talk about it, because that's key. And also really pushing them. We don't just want one answer for them. We want another. How many other ways can you do it? Yeah. Okay, which is another thing which is part of the mastery. So now moving on to subtraction, which I'll be honest with you, kids normally find this much harder than addition. Yeah. But this is the similar steps. Okay, we would start with the concrete. Oh, I'll just get my light, sorry. I'm not moving around enough. I needed to dig around a bit. The lights went. Yeah. So once we've done the concrete, so we would be using these Deans as well. Again, we could be using counters. They tend to use counters more in Key Stage 2 in year 3 and 4. We tend to use these because they're easier to see that they're 10 or 100. So we'll be looking at, once we've done the actual concrete, we'll look at the pictures. Yeah, we take them through it really slowly so they really understand what they're doing. Yeah, each way. And then before we move on to column. Yeah, now I think, you know, it is important that children understand column addition and column subtraction, but it's also really important that they understand what they're doing. Yeah, and so when you're talking to them, you know, you need to explain that we've got the 10s and the 1s, and that's how they should be talking through if you want to do those. I'm not suggesting that you do any column addition and subtraction. You know, I'm expecting to do it with them, but just so you know what we do. Okay, now moving on to multiplication, which is what we're working on now. And if you think about where we've done it in school this last week, you know, we've really started using objects so they really understand it, and we've broken it down really slowly so that children understand what that number sentence is. So they understand that 4 times 3 equals 12. They can see that in their head because they've been touching things, they've been moving things around, they've been looking at pictures. So they have a deep understanding of what multiplication means, which is why now in year 2 we're able to explain to them, about the property of multiplication, that it's not just 4 times 3, it's 3 times 4, and that you can swap it over and still get the same answer. And you've got children in year 2 going, oh yeah, I see that because I can move it and I can do it. So you're really deepening their understanding. Now moving on to division, which we'll be doing later on. You can see we'd start off using counters, or which would be easy for them to move around, and then getting them to sort of circle and make groups so they really understand how this works, and then talking them through the relationship with multiplication and division. And then with all of these, there obviously is an element of word problems that they need to think about, and part of their work will be moving on to looking at how to solve 2-step problems with those operations that I've just gone on to. Now, I think when we're thinking about maths at home for your child, one of the areas that I've noticed that children struggle with, even since I've been starting right from reception, is the difference now is money. And that's because children don't really see money. All right, in the last couple of years, if you think about the way that, particularly with COVID, the way that we're swiping everything, we've got cards. Even for very small transactions now, you use cards, and so children aren't able to touch money. And so, if you are doing money, then that's great, but lots of people aren't. I remember as a child counting money in my mum's purse, working out for the shopkeeper how much the sweets were going to be. We just don't do that anymore. So something that you could do at home, which I think would be really valuable, would be looking at the value of coins and adding up how much. So we're working within £1, so it would be, a lot of the children this year took ages to learn to recognise the coins. Now, in previous years, that wouldn't be the case because they'll have seen more coins. But if you compare that to 5 years ago, where they would instantly have known what a 5, a 1 and a 2p was, we were having to spend a lot of time getting them to sort the coins so that they did know what the value of each coin was. So that's definitely something that you can help us with. They did all right, but we're going to have to keep coming back to money. They're going to have to keep thinking about different ways of making the same amount. So we had children saying, oh, 3p, get the 3p coin. I said, there isn't a 3p coin, we've only got a 2p and a 1p. Now, money can be difficult, not every, and it doesn't necessarily, when you're teaching money, it's not the children who sometimes find other aspects of maths easy can find money tricky. It doesn't always follow. And some children that find some bits of maths hard find maths really easy. One school I was working on, I had a child who came from a family who had a shop, and he found money really easy because he was doing it all the time, whereas other aspects of maths he found difficult. It really is something that you need to practice. So I'm afraid I'll give you a little bit of homework. If you can try and count purses and give them money and things like that, that would be really helpful. The same with time. That is something that really is really good for children's independence, to know how long it's going to be till break, to know how long it's going to be till lunch, to know when mummy's coming to collect them or daddy, is really liberating for them so that they can use time. So that's a really important life skill that I suggest, I do it every day with them, but anything that you can do at home, and also not just talking about telling the time, which can be tricky, but also talking about how long. So we're driving to grandma's, that's going to be 2 hours. We're setting off at 9. Oh, I wonder what time we're going to can I tell grandma what time we're going to be there? Let's send a text and tell her what time. Those kind of natural conversations where it doesn't feel forced. Or we're going on the train. So how long is that going to take us? Or we're catching, I don't know how many of you catch the bus, but things like that. Talking about, we're going to be there 10 minutes. Okay, things like that, so they get a concept of what time is, so they have a deeper understanding, rather than just saying, how many minutes, we do how many minutes in an hour, but so they really get to feel what time would be like. Number facts to 20. So all of you, I know, spent lots of time doing number bonds to 10, but it's cranked up now to 20. We really need to all be working on that, and I would suggest Hit the Button is a really good way. It's a free app that you can use, a really good way of working on those addition and subtraction facts for number bond facts to 20, and it's quick. We want our children not to be using their fingers, yeah, to work out how many more to get to 20. We want them to just know, because if they just know, it makes life so much easier for them. And I do a lot of that. I mean, we've been working on 2s, 3s, 5s and 10s, but we're really going to crank up those number facts to 20 over the next few weeks. When it comes to times tables, I think the children are doing really well. I see them every day. They come in and they write their 2s and their 5s after lunch, and they are getting much better. And I'm glad to see they're doing the 3s as well, which will help them. We send home mental maths. We haven't sent it home this week, but we will be sending it later on in the week for you to practice. And I know lots of you do that, so that's really useful. Another thing that you can do with them is estimation, which is useful, making estimates, not just of time, but of any measure. That's really useful. And also when you're going around the shops, talking about, I wonder how much it's going to be. Oh, that's £1, £2. That's going to be roughly £3. Oh, yeah, I've got a £5 note. That's fine. Yeah, those kind of conversations are really useful for children, because estimation is checking that things are right. Going back to the money again. If you get a receipt, just checking to see that everything's on there. Things like that, all really useful stuff. Now, I mean, going back to when I was teaching reception, but I mean, you say it in reception and people often don't say it afterwards, but things like cooking are really, really useful. You think about all the maths that you do in basic cookery, the measuring, you talk about grams, you talk about, time, how long it's cooking, you talk about, ratios as well, if you can get quite tricky. Yeah, but I mean, all that cooking is a really good way of getting children to do maths without them knowing it, and shopping as well. And also games, Snakes and Ladders is an absolutely fantastic way of getting children to know the first numbers to 100. Yeah, because you're going up and you're talking about, I'm on 43, I'm going to count on 2, I'm going to be on 45, things like that. All really useful. Any board games like that are all useful. Even board games that don't necessarily have money have got the children rolling dice and working out the next steps and things like that. So they're all really useful things that you can do if you're not somebody who wants to sit there and do, worksheets or workbooks. Now, I came from year 4 before, when they introduced, I was the first cohort to be doing the times tables assessment. Now, we've done our phonics assessment, which is tick, great. Now, in year 4, the children are going to be doing their times tables assessment. It's no good waiting till year 4 to start going on about times tables. Yeah, the time to do the 2s, the 5s, the 10s and the 3s is now. Yeah, because when they get to year 3, they'll need to know a few more, and when they get to year 4, it's only 2 years away, they'll need to know them all. 12 times 12, they need to know all of the times table facts. So now is the time, to start working on them now. And I have certainly done that in school, because I know from teaching year 4, and also for having a child in, who did SATs. If you know your times tables, it makes your maths higher up in school so much easier, because the maths gets tricky. If you're doing long multiplication and you've got to keep thinking what the answer is, that makes it really tricky for you. If you know that fact, if you know that 2 8s are 16, then you don't even have to think about it. So yeah, I would really recommend that now is the time. I did have a SATs meeting earlier, so I don't want to go on with that. Just to reassure you that we'll be covering everything before they do it. They'll get loads of practice. This term, I'm starting to put little extension things that look like the SATs questions in the same type. So, when you come and look at their books, you'll see we're starting to do things like that. So they're starting to know what they look like, so they get a little bit less nervous. They'll be doing the papers in May, and they'll be doing them in small groups. They have already done one assessment, a SATs paper, and they'll be doing another one before the real thing, and we're doing lots of practice as well. And they know they've just got to just try not to get them to worry about it, because I think anxiety is a real problem with maths. And it can stop them doing their best. They certainly will be reassured in school, and I know that you'll do that at home. That seems to have gone quite quick now. I've been talking, hardly taking a breath. So has anyone got any questions? Now's the time. If it's something particular about your child, I appreciate this isn't the right forum to do that. Please either email me or catch me on the playground, and I can see you after school if you've got any particular concerns or if you want any help. I would recommend Hit the Button and also Times Tables Rockstars. I think Hit the Button is probably a good thing to do first. And Times Table Rockstars, when they've got a bit more confidence, is something to do after that. But all the things that I've recommended, time, money, all those things are the way forward. Has anyone got any questions? No?
Hiya, sorry, Roland's dad. Just a very quick one. You were talking earlier about the, when you're doing additions and you carry the one, you mentioned, was it exchange? Was the terminology?
Yeah, we talk about exchange, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to check that because I'm doing that all the time with him, keep referring to old terminology, and
yeah, I know, and it changes. I mean, to be fair, when I first started teaching, we called them units, and now we call them ones. But it is important that you talk about them exchanging, because I tell you why. It's because they will, when they take these 10, they make them into small 10 ones. So it really is an exchange for them, not just, in talking, but they actually see that happening. So yeah, that's what you need to do. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, or have you all had enough of me waffling on?
No, it was really good, very clear.
All right. Thank you. I think you're going to be sent a survey via text, so you can rate me, and if anyone has got any questions, not just about maths, I know it can be tricky, and because we're standing away from you now, please do email in, and I do always put, I don't know if you know, but the home learning has got the maths sheets that we have done in school, and it's got the links to the videos. So, if you ever wanted to have a look at them, and obviously if your child is often not ill, that's where to go to do the maths, because I know, numbers are going up with COVID, people are going to start being off. So all that maths learning is updated, and I do it so that it's on there on the Sunday night. So any of you that are working who need to print it, there's plenty of time for you to print the sheets off in preparation. If they bring them in and when they get back, then I will mark them all. Okay, so if that's it then, nice to see you. Thank you very much for turning up.
Thank you.
Full marks, and I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks very much.